Welcome to Talking Papers, the podcast where we talk about papers and let the papers do the talking. We host early career academics and PhD students to share their cutting-edge research in computer vision, machine learning, and everything in between. I'm your host, Itzik Ben Shabbat, a researcher by day and podcaster by night. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Talking Papers, the podcast where we talk about papers and let the papers do the talking. Today, however, we're switching things up. Instead of our usual paper discussion, we're delving into a topic that's incredibly crucial for anyone in academia: how to find and choose a PhD advisor. Joining us today is a dear friend and a brilliant mind, Derek Liu, who you might remember from a previous episode. Hi, Derek. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, Itzik. And like you said, it's my pleasure to be here on the Talking Paper podcast for the second time. And I'm currently a research scientist at Roblox. And for my journey, I grew up in this tiny island called Taiwan and do all the school until bachelor's there. And after that, I studied my master's at Carnegie Mellon University at US. And then move on to University of Toronto in Canada for my PhD. And I was very lucky that during my journey, I was able to meet brilliant advisors during my master's and PhD, and also get to meet so many great mentors during my internships. And I'm more than happy to share my the good things I found in them, and hope these characteristics could help you all to kind of find the ideal advisor for you.
Cool. Wow. Amazing that you had such an interesting journey. And it's especially crucial for our discussion today because you bring several continents into the mix. And it's important because there are things that change between different countries. And we're going to try and stay very general in a sense that we're going to try and say things that are relevant regardless of country, of the degree, the PhD, or whatever.
Yeah, but before that, I'm also curious about your journey, Itzik. I never get a chance to ask you about what's your journey here.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I mean, people are listening to the podcast, and not all of them know my journey. So I was born and grew up in Israel. And I did both my bachelor's, my master's, and my PhD in the Tenure in Israel. And then I moved for a postdoc position in Australia. I am currently, until recently, I was a research fellow at the Tenure, and I'm still holding a visiting research fellow position at ANU. And yeah, similar to you, throughout my journey, I was lucky to have very supportive advisors that some of them became friends and mentors for life. But when I was going through the process, when I was going through the ranks, when I was doing my degrees, I didn't know the questions I needed to ask. I didn't know, that these things matter so much. I didn't know that I was always oh, please take me, it was this kind of, and some people feel like that, and it shouldn't be, right? You need to, PhD students need to understand their value and understand the fact that starting a PhD is a commitment for a long time with a person that has tremendous power over you, more than any other position, right? So this is a very important decision. But let's talk about it. Why is it such an important decision? So what makes choosing an advisor so important?
Oh, that's a really great question. So this may be a little bit different from people who hasn't done any PhD, but if you ask, at least based on my own experience with talking with friends or with faculty. By the way, all the experience I share is not just my own personal experience, but this is also an experience that I know from talking with my friends and then some other professors and other students, and learn from their experiences. So from chatting with them, I think a lot of them, once they for example in the middle of a PhD process or after their PhDs, then they share a common argument is that like choosing an advisor for your PhD is perhaps more important than choosing the school that you study in. And the reason is because when you think about what is a successful PhD, I believe different people will have a different definitions. But one of them, I think it's very common, share across different people, is that if you're in a PhD and you publish some great, amazing paper that everyone recognizes, and so whenever people talk about you, they will think about, oh, you're the person that published blah, 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 great papers. So if you have this kind of representative work and make great impact to the community, I believe most people will agree that this is a successful PhD career. So if you base on this definition and then think about what we just discussed, you'll notice that there's nothing related to like what's the school you're in, and then for example, sometimes it's even less about like who's your advisor. So in this case, I think the most important decision, like at least people will agree, is that choosing the right advisor for you that can help you to reach this status is the most important thing. So basically, I would say choosing the PhD advisor is very, very important, because like that advisor is going to be your mentor. You're going to learn a lot from them, and they're going to be your colleague for like a basic collaborators for 5 years, and even mentor and colleagues for the rest of your career. So choosing the right one that really can is kind of like a killer combo that can make you do great research is very, very important. It's not about less about which school you're in, to be honest.
Yeah, I totally agree, because I think finding an advisor can either make or break your career, right? Like, of course, you have a lot of influence because it's your career, but choosing the wrong person that you end up not getting along with or have some disagreement with, like, you're going to need this person for, reference letters for your next job, especially if it's an academic track, right? Those reference letters are like the most important thing of the application, right? And if you don't have a good one from people that's well known in the community, it's going to be harder. It's not going to be impossible, right? Because if you have a strong track record and you published and you're well known on your own, then you're going to do okay. You're going to do fine. But if you also have an advisor, right, that you get along with, and they're your mentor, and you like each other and you work together and you collaborate, like that's something that you bring with you, right, throughout, right, wherever you go, you got that connection, you got that network. But I think there's an important disclaimer, right, to say before we dive into any of the specifics, right, which is there's no one size fits all, right? Like different people need things to succeed, okay? And good advisors know to adapt to their students and meet their needs, right? If you need more space, they will give it to you. If you need more hands-on or kind of micromanagement, they will do that. But some people can't do it, right? We're human. So advisors are human, and this is like one thing to take into account, that we're going to say a lot of things, right? And it might vary, right? It may apply to you, it may not. Pick and choose whatever you take from here. And there's one sentence I particularly like that someone told me, is that the best advice that I can give you is don't listen to anyone's advice, right? Which is it's a nice statement, right? Because we're going to try to outline a bunch of things that you can follow, like general guidelines, but definitely don't take it as set in stone, and choose whatever works for you, and listen and ask the questions that you need.
Yeah, I just want to second that argument. That's totally true. A lot of the advice we are discussing is perhaps is mainly based on our experience with our colleagues, and also based on our own experiences. And then different people have different personalities that you may find a different type of argument, different type of characteristic work for you better. In that case, just take them. Don't listen to us.
And I mean, I guess there's one more point I want to say why it's important to do your homework when you're selecting an advisor, is that if you think about the day-to-day, right, A PhD program is usually 4 or 5 years, depends on you, the location, your academic journey, whatever. And that person, that PhD advisor, is a person that you're going to spend your next 5 years with, right? That's a long time it's almost like a marriage, right? You're going to work together, you're going to do research together, sometimes you're going to be their TA in their course, right? This is a lot of interaction with one person, and it's important to make the right choice. Okay, let's start by kind of setting the stage, right? So there are some things that PhD students or people applying to a PhD program don't really know or understand, and the first thing I want us to talk about is the pre versus post-tenure position that advisors have. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So that's so basically, if you are apply for a faculty and start a faculty, you start with the assistant professor, and those positions are usually we call pre-tenure. Basically means that they haven't got their lifetime professorship. So in that case, those professors very energetic. They just for example, fresh graduate from their PhD or just finished their postdoc, very energetic, ready to do a lot of great research with you. And those are like a pre-tenure professors are in this mindset. And post-tenure advisors is something like you're in your professorship for 5 years or 10 years, depends on the time is different, depends on the school or different countries. But after that is that you finally get the tenureship, meaning that you're guaranteed to be a professor for your life unless you quit it or you any other kind of
something very, very bad. They can't fire you essentially.
Yes. So yeah, I think this too will kind of because this two things is like a status difference in terms of the advisor. So their mindset may change, their style may change, and yeah, it will result in very different style if you look into these two categories of the professors.
Right, and in the post-tenure, usually in the US, I think the titles are associate professor and full professor, right? In some places of the world, the assistant professor is called lecturer or senior lecturer, and then there's again, associate professor and professors. I think it's important to discuss a little bit about the pros and cons of these different stages for advisors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I would say at least for assistant professors, pre-tenure professors, sometimes it's a funny thing that your success is very important to their success, because in order for them to get a tenureship, it is very important that the students, especially the early batch of students, their advice are very successful. This means a lot to them and also helps them a lot to get a tenureship. So sometimes it's good that you're kind of on the same boat with them, because your success also means their success, and it could be a little bit intense journey because you're kind of tied together and you're going to publish great papers together. But it's also a good thing that you are going to learn a lot from them and then share the success with them. And sometimes it even means that you will have more personal interactions, because when someone just start their start their professorship, they may not have a big lab at the first few years. So it means that they don't if they hire a postdoc, then maybe a different case. But if they don't have a postdoc, they are the only person that are going to kind of advise you personally. So you're going to learn directly from the expert in the world. I think that's actually a very great thing, and I enjoy a lot. To be honest, that's also the style personally I'm prefer, but may not be the preference for you, Itzik. What's your preference?
Yeah, so I think you made some great points. I only want to add that these assistant professors, pre-tenure people, they're usually much younger. So they're more, and they're very eager to prove themselves. So they're very active. They know their research. They're on top of things. They might even sit and code with you. They would look at your code. They would be really engaged in the research. But then again, they're still building their career, right? So they would be very busy in building the lab, and they will do a bunch of other things, which may take up a lot of their time. Which, like you said, it can be good and it can be bad. But I want to kind of like the only caveat here that could be a little bit on the negative side is that the whole academic journey is new to them. The whole institute they're in might be new, right? So this is usually like it takes like I don't know between 4 to 7 years until you get tenure, depending on the place and depending on the person. But if it's someone that's really just starting out, they're just learning the ropes. They don't know all of the rules of the academic institution. They don't have like the connections to get you through the politics that you need to. Which other, tenured, more seasoned professors would know, oh yeah, this is how you do that, and this is how you do this. So they kind of learn things along with you. And there's also the thing that what we will cover later on is the grants and money, right? So usually when you're starting off, not all the time, you get like a starting grant to start your lab that you get you like some money and some funding for your new PhD students. Not all the time, it's not all the time, it's not necessarily enough. And they spend a lot of money writing grants and they need to attract money. And it's not necessarily that they have that. When you move on to like post-tenure ones, they usually like have leftover grants from previous years and like they know how to apply already, like they've learned that process. So it's easier for them to attract more money because they're more established, right? Again, depends on the person, but like these are things that kind of could be a pro and con for both, right? But I think, let's say more established professor post-tenure ones, there's a risk there that they might be, because they're very established, we mostly covered the pre-tenure ones, but I think it's a good time to start talking about the post-tenure one, right? So
Yeah.
Let's say the associate professors, they're like somewhere in between, right? They're still young, but already established. And they might not get into the code as much as they used to, but they still remember all of that. They're already seasoned in politics and they have their funding, but they're not like fully, they didn't get a professorship yet, so they're kind of doing a lot of committees and all these things. While the full professors, they're already established. Some of them take on some administrative roles in the institution, so that takes up a lot of their time. They move away from their core research, so they might not be as up to date, and they kind of take advantage of the conversations with the students to stay up to date, right? And if you're a type of person that goes off and explodes and reads a lot of papers on your own and you don't need anyone to tell you, oh, check that paper out, then you're fine with those. You're going to give them the update. They'll give you their life experience, right? Because that's a lot what they have to offer at that point. What do you think?
Yeah. I also want to add, I would say for post-tenure professors, actually, my personal experience is that there are a lot of variance, and there's a lot of them are like you, they already very established. Perhaps they even have a big lab that they may not be able to kind of hands-on debugging a code with you, things like that. But they're brilliant to give you very high level, even like long-term advice to ask the right question, let you to think about the right stuff that will help you to grow a lot. So, but there are also some, because a lot of the people who they start the professorship is because they really love doing research. So I also see a lot of post-tenure professors that are very, very hands-on. They just can't make sure that the lab size is pretty moderate, like less than 10 people or something. And they have time for every student to work on every project. Those are also brilliant post-tenure advisors because they have the experience, but they also act like a pre-tenure advisor in terms of their energy in the research. In that case, that could also be a great thing for students that can simultaneously get both like the high-level advice from experienced professors, and then they also get like a very hands-on experience. So I would say for post-tenure professors, personally, I don't think there's a one characterization to them, but because the variance is like huge, and it's very important to, for example, to talk about what we may discuss next, to identify, okay, what other possible styles they are if they're kind of after tenureship.
Right. So yeah, just to sum up this pre versus post tenure part, I would just say, remember, there's pre-tenure professors and post-tenure professors. There are pros and cons to choosing each. So make sure you do your homework before you choose, but make sure you know at which stage they are before you make any decision, because your next questions and your next homework you're going to ask and do about that person, you always have to keep in mind, okay, he's that type of professor, this type of their career, right? Okay, I think it's a nice time to move on to kind of the group size and its influence.
Okay, I would say first that, at least based on my experience, at least most of the advisor knows how to advise students like suits their need, because they gone through like all the stages, like from a young PhD to a successful PhD and to like a professorship. But the topic that you just mentioned, the group size, is really one of the major factors that determines their supervision style and the thing they're capable of doing in terms of their time constraints. For example, if you have like a lab with like 20, 30, 40 people, and it's just impossible for them to have, for example, a 1 hour meeting with every student, and they have to be like a hierarchical structure. For example, they advise more postdoc, and postdoc advise students, and then et cetera, et cetera. And if you have a small group size, meaning, for example, less than 10 people or some even less than 5 people, and this may indicate that the professors may have more time that to spend with you, like having a weekly meeting with you, and even if you encounter some very low-level questions, and they may be able to help you on that front. So I would say group size is very, very important, and then I would say it changed like the experience you have a lot. And if you're in a large group, you can also look into some factors that are other than your advisor, because if you're working in a large group, it means that you have a lot of postdoc, a lot of like fellow students, and those things may also help you grow, like more than your advisor perhaps. So yeah, that's just the first thing popping in my mind about the group size. How about you, Itzik? Do you have any other experiences?
Yeah, so I think like it's important to know that it might also be different in different countries, right? I know that like in some places in Europe, it's very common to like have this hierarchical structure where at the top you have this professor that has like the 4, 5, 8, 10 postdocs, and each of them is advising 4, 5, 8, 10 PhD students. Then there's like this huge lab, so these people have like a huge number of citations, huge number of papers out every year, and it really depends on what you're looking for, right? If you're looking for this kind of company-like structure where you're kind of a cog in the system, but you also have the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of different people and learn from a lot of different people, then that might be the thing that works best for you. But for me, I like the more boutique style groups that are smaller, that there's a lot of personal connections. You spend time with your advisor, you talk about research, you talk about life, you have maybe a few more PhDs around you, you're each kind of tackling similar but different problems, so you have these interesting conversations together. But it really depends on the style that you're looking for. Like some people like the big group and like no micromanagement, and you're kind of doing your thing, and some like the boutique style and kind of almost flying solo, right?
Yeah, and I also want to, because you mentioned about like the pros in terms of like a boutique size of the lab. Personally, I also prefer the small group size, but I also want to mention that there are also some advantages if you're working on a large group. Because, for example, I know that there are some students that start their PhD with a lot of research experience. So they perhaps do a master's already, or they perhaps even start doing research during their undergrad. They have hundreds of citations already before starting their PhD. And for students like are very kind of mature and knows how to do research, usually the things you need are the resources. And if you're usually in a big lab, if you're like able to kind of have a big lab, usually you have a lot of like collaborators, like even within a lab, they will even have a lot of fundings that will give you like resources for computing or other things. So it depends. If you want like the personal relationship and like experience like with the advisor that you're wanting to collaborate with, then perhaps a smaller size may suit you better. But if you're a person that really wants some, like for example, some sparse high level advice from your advisor, but having a large group that have a lot of resources, then perhaps a big group is the right one for you.
Right, and it really depends on your style, right? Because some people like to have that go-to guy that you go to and you ask, oh, how do you do this and how do you do that? And in the big lab, you're going to have that guy, right? But in a small lab, you're not necessarily going to have, maybe there's like this PhD that started the year before you that you go and talk to them, oh, you do this way, right? And it really depends on the size of the group. For me, actually, in my journey, there was a point that I was the only PhD in the group, and it was a little bit lonely for a while. I mean, it was fine for me because I like working solo. I like doing things on my own. I'm fine making progress like that, but it was lonely, right? And I think collaborations didn't form internally. I formed them externally, but like it really needs that personality that you're actually going to do that, right? You're going to chase out collaborations if they're not available next to you, right? I guess to sum up this part, like group size matters. You need to figure out if a larger or smaller group works for you. There's no one size fits all here as well. Now, I mean, we talked about the size of the group, but let's talk about the lab in general, right? So it's composed of people, infrastructure, resources, money, international collaborations, industry collaborations. So what are you looking for? And what do they have to offer when you're looking for a PhD advisor?
Yeah, that's a very, I would say, broad question because it touches a lot of aspects. Okay, so I think I was going to mention some of them, at least the one that's important personally to me, and then perhaps Itzik, you can also comment on the things I care about. For example, for me, a thing I care about the lab is one thing I care about is the diversity, like diversity in terms of like not just like for example the diversity in terms of like the people there, but also in terms of a little bit on the diversity of the topics. For instance, for my research, I do like computer graphics or more specific geometry processing. So in that case, I'm more interested in joining a geometry processing group where people are expert in different topics in the geometry processing. So if I'm interested in this today, there's an expert in this area I can seek help with. And if another week I'm interested in another topic, then there will also be a person that I can discuss with. So one thing I really like is like having a group with diversity in terms of like people, in terms of the topic. I think that's a resource that I will really appreciate because I love to chat about different areas and with different people. And another thing is that it's very personal thing, but I personally like to be in a happy lab. If you talk with the students there and the people there, the advisor there, you feel like, it's a happy lab, not like a very stressful, like people are, I'm competing against, I don't know, for example, number of papers and things like that. Usually I think I will be more happy because I'm going to spend the next 5 years in that lab. So it has to be a happy lab that I'm going to enjoy being there, just being there, sit there doing research. I think I care about like this, whether this is a happy lab and whether the people have diversity in the group.
I'm so happy that I'm so happy that you started with this because I think this is the most important thing, right? The people in the lab, they are the most important thing, right? Because you're going to see these people every day. You might not work with them on the topic, but you're going to see them a lot. You're going to interact with them a lot. So it's important that these are people that you can make your friends, right? Because you hear a lot of those stories how like, oh, we're doing our PhD and we had this idea and then we spun it off into a company, right? And this can't happen if you're not in good relationship with the people around you at the lab. And it's so important to have good people around you. I think like you called it a happy lab, right? And I agree. I call it like a friendship lab, right? Like everybody's friend, like sure, you can get along with people more and less, right? You can have like closer friends within the lab. And others, but I think because like for a PhD, it's a long journey, right? It starts and ends at a certain point, but it's basically a pivoting point in your career where you're actually starting to build your professional network. And those people that sat next to you in your lab that became your friend, they're going to be a professor somewhere someday, or they're going to be a research scientist in some company, or a manager, or the CEO of some startup. And it's so important to be like in a place that you feel good at, right? So I think the people are maybe the most important thing. I mean, after the advice.
Sorry. What are other aspects that you think may be useful to consider?
Yeah, I guess there's like this umbrella that's I would call infrastructure, resources, and money, right? Because like in today's research world, at least in our field, you almost can't publish if you don't have a strong GPU or a GPU cluster or several of them, right? And you can never have enough of that. And it is important that the lab has the infrastructure to support that, right? If you need to start building your own cluster, and it ties to the first point we were talking about, like the pre-tenure versus post-tenure, right? If you're in a lab that's just building up, right, they might not have that cluster yet. And the fact that it doesn't have it's okay, right? But as long as like there's we're getting the money is getting at this time and we're building this, so you're going to be a part of building this kind of thing. So that's the nice experience to have. But if it's a lab that doesn't have it, that doesn't have a plan to have it, or doesn't have the capacity to facilitate that, then you need to think about that, right? Can you do the research that you want to do at a place that does not have the right resources or infrastructure? And I'm also going to tie this into personnel, right? So some labs have like an administrator, and they have a lab engineer or several lab engineers. And these things can matter, right? Because if you have a good team around you, that's that's people that work there, they stay there, they keep the knowledge. It doesn't like all fall on the PhD students to pass the knowledge on. Then it kind of strips away a lot of hard work that some PhDs have to do. But then the other side of that coin is once you have to do it, you kind of get experience, right? Of doing those kind of things. And it really depends, right? What are you looking for? You're looking for pure research, give me what I need for success, right? Which would probably get you more papers out, or building things from scratch, getting the experience you need to become your own lab leader. So these are kind of different sides of the same thing. What do you think?
Well, I think the last point you mentioned really clicked to me, at least. I was really appreciate that during the PhD, there are amazing team that supports us. Like, for example, the IT person that almost helped me to resolve all the hardware issues or the cluster issues or even some software issues that I need to continue my research. And I to be honest, I can't finish my PhD without his help. To me, that's just so important. So I think this is the resources, the support that you're going to get. Yeah, I think that's a very, very crucial aspect that people should consider. And then I don't know what are other important aspects that you think.
So I think two stand out as far as collaborations go, because they're international collaboration and industry collaborations. What's your take on collaborations?
I think this is a great point. So I think. I think it really depends on you. At least I would say a lab with either industry collaborations or international collaborations are very important. And I know that to be honest, there are a lot of advisors who have both. And if you have some industrial connections, maybe it means that you will may have higher chance to, for example, get an internship at that company, or you also have the resources to see what are the problems that people are facing in the industry, because that may be very different from, for example, the paper problem you see on SIGGRAPH Asia. I think so having industry connections, I think, is very important for you to know what's the real world problems that people are facing, and also for you to, for example, get some industrial experiences if you think that's helpful for you. And having international collaboration, I think it's very, very important, because in my opinion, I think research is not something that can do it alone. And a lot of amazing papers are coming from collaborating with great people. So if you for example, by looking at the publication record from the lab, you can get a sense of what are international collaborators they're working with. And if they're all great people, then it's likely that when you join the lab and start working in the lab doing research, and those great people, international great people, may also become your collaborators in the future or your networks in the future. May also play an important role for your career as well. For example, they become your postdoc advisor or something like that. So yeah, I think this is like truly important, like having collaborations and then for the lab.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, as I said before, your PhD is your kind of turning point of building your professional network, right? And it's the easiest thing to check if a specific advisor that you're considering that will be your PhD supervisor. It's super easy to check if they have international or industry collaborators. You open their Google Scholar page, you look at or you open their recent publications, you see who is on those publications. If it's just them and their students, then they don't have a lot of international or industry collaborations. But if it's them and a bunch of names that you don't know and can look up on Google and see, oh, this guy works at this company, and this person works at that company, and this woman works at the other company, or she's from this university, or he's from that university, right? Then that's the best indicator, right? Because they publish together, so they work together, so they have collaborations. The other thing to note that usually industry collaborations also have like another good thing that comes with them, which is either resources in the form of GPU or cloud credits or whatever, and sometimes even funding, like actual money to fund the student. It might even be like some advisor would recruit a specific project with a company, and that's A, great experience, B, great network builder. The only caveat here is that it might have less flexibility as far as the research topic, right? It's more strict, and like if you want to go and do your own thing, then it might not work for you. But other than that, I think these are all the upsides and things that are easy to check. Okay, we kind of touched on the next title, but I think it's important to talk about it specifically, and the title is Money, Money, Money. So a lot of people don't know, right? How does money in academia work, and what to look for when you're trying to find your advisor?
Oh, this is it's a very serious question. To be honest, I think money is important in the way that because sometimes if you have a lot of funding, and the funding there are different types of funding. There are some fundings that are just give it to the lab, do whatever research you want to. That's the best kind of funding, just like a gift money. But there are also some kinds of funding that will restrict the research direction that you may want to pursue, because, for example, this is a funding from some companies, and they want this funding to fund your lab to do certain type of research. So I would say, in terms of the money, it's perhaps Itzik, you can chime in later on how can we differentiate between these fundings by looking at them. But personally, my personal take is that the knowing the funding is important, because if the funding is like a gift money to a lab, like you can do whatever you want, and it means that you have a lot of flexibility in choosing a topic that really interests to you. But if the funding for the lab is mainly come from like a most restrict category, then somehow it means that maybe your research is going to be restricted to those areas because of the funding, because those funding are the ones that are used to fund your PhD. And if they are perfect match to your interest, that would be brilliant. But if they are not, this may be a small red flag that you may consider whether you're interested in doing that kind of research. How about you, Itzik?
Yeah, so I think, well, first of all, I think it's important to list out things that money is spent on, right? So there's the first thing, right, which is the scholarship, right? This is the money that the PhD is getting to their bank account. That's basically some places it's an actual salary, some places it's a scholarship, so it's kind of like this grant money, so you don't pay taxes on it and stuff like that. So it really depends on the country. But that's one source of money, and that's usually the highest amount that the advisor has to collect and spends on, right? So the people. The second thing that money is spent on is travel to conferences, right? If you have an advisor that's very low on money, they're not going to be able to help you to go to international conferences, right? So you're going to have to find funding for that yourself or somehow, and that could really hinder someone's career. So you want to find an advisor that has money to pay you, and when I say money to pay you is enough money to pay, right? Because most universities, they have like a minimum amount and a maximum amount, and like it depends on your personal lifestyle and personal situation. I had 2 kids during my PhD, right? That I needed more money than a single person, right? Because kids, they eat up money. But jokes aside, right? You want to make sure that it's enough that you can live off of, or like you have enough savings to get you through this. Because the worst thing that can happen is you realizing, well, you don't have enough money to go through your day to day. You don't want to go into debt and like you have to quit in the middle, right? So this is a situation you don't want to get into. So you want to make sure they have enough money to pay you and they have enough money to send you to different type of conferences. And this is also like, it's not just conferences, right? There are a bunch of summer schools, which are like great training opportunities. These opportunities are for networking and all those sort of things. And if the advisor has a lot of money, he will be very positive into, advancing your career, take this money for this particular career opportunity and do it, right? But if they're more strict on it and they don't have a lot of it, then those opportunities might not arise. The third thing that money gets spent on is equipment, right? You need to buy things. If it's computers, GPUs, some labs need, specific equipment like scanners and cameras and like they build things and hardware, right? So you need money for those type of things. So this is what money gets spent on. And you started saying about how money comes in, right? So there is the grant, like the gift type money, and the industry collaborations also result in some money. But I actually want to talk about some grants, right? So grants and these kind of form of money transfer, most people don't know about them or how that works when they start off a PhD. So what happens is there is some, either a government agency or some place that publishes an open call for applications, right? They're going to, for example, the European Union has a very prestigious one, the ELC grants, right? Everybody knows them. Each grant is for a particular stage in your career that you can apply for, and that's like millions of euros to support your research. So advisors need to write out those grant applications. They submit them. They get evaluated. If they're lucky, they get the grant money. Now, usually when an advisor gets one of those, he's super proud of that. He would write it in their personal website or some other news feed, right? So it's easy to see if they have that money, right? Getting an ELC grant, it's huge, right? Not just because of the money, it's a huge life achievement, right? When I received my Marie Curie fellowship, which is like the one step lower, like in the one stage earlier in the career, I would say, before the ELCs, I was excited. I wanted everyone to know I got this fellowship, because it's not because of I got the money, right? Because it's a prestigious one. It's competitive. I managed to get through the process of all writing that huge grant proposal, right? So it's easy to see if they have those and when they started and where they're going to end and how much money each of those is. Sometimes they would even write it out explicitly in their CV, because this is something that when you apply for academic positions or academic promotions and all those kind of things, they want to know how much money you attracted for the university, right? Universities, when they hire professors, they want to know that these professors are going to get money in, because the university have like, they take a part of it, they take a chunk. Sure, everybody needs to make a living. But for PhDs that are looking into money aspects of their future advisor, they should see what grants have they received in the, let's say, past 5 years, right? That would give you an indication how well that person is good at attracting money to begin with, and it also reflects on the future. It's this kind of snowball effect, right? If you got one, it's easier to get the other because you got the previous one, so you put it on your CV. And if you got two, now the third one is easier because you got the previous two, right? So it's snowball effect, right? And this goes again to the pre-tenure versus post-tenure, right? So pre-tenure, they're going to spend a lot of time writing grant applications just to get that snowball rolling. Whereas post-tenure, you should be expecting to see several grants on their CV, more competitive, less competitive, more prestigious, less prestigious, but you want to see those. If that doesn't appear, that's a red flag, right? That just means that they're either relying on the university resources, which may not be enough or may be very limited, and that's just you need to think about that, right? If you can work around that, right? Like for me, not a lot of people know that, but I don't come from money, right? So money aspect during my PhD, that was tight. And with the family, that was even tighter. And it was a stress level that, I think people need to take into account before they start the process, right? And not during, right? These are things that I learned during my PhD. There's grants. We need to apply for stuff, right? And for me, that was a great learning experience because when I saw we needed resources, I was, okay, let's get those resources. I started writing grants, right? But I'm not sure that during a PhD, you could get some experience in grant writing, but I don't think this is something that should be kind of your main focus, because in a PhD, your main focus should be research, right? So you want to allocate a very, limited amount of time to grant writing, if at all. So that's an important thing to take.
That's a great point. I think what you mentioned is, I would say, really, really coming from your own experience. I think those are very, very great point. And I even want to add one more point. At least it reminds me that a friend of mine who started a PhD without looking at the money issue or funding issue, and it happened to have start a PhD, but truly without funding at all. So he has to find every single source of funding so that he can, living a reasonable life, even if he's doesn't have kids, just a single person. And it just means that then basically constantly doing many TAs every semester, eating a lot of your time, and very stressful to find an internship every single summer, because that's the main source of money that he can earn. And then, like you said, spend a lot of time applying all the fellowship and all the grant. I will encourage fellowships may be a different thing, because that's also a nice thing that you should probably spend some of your time, like Itzik said, because it will add you to your CV that, I got this fellowship and it's great recognition, things like that. But other than this, I think a PhD is just like you said, you should spend most of your time on your research, not on other services or engineering works or I don't know, less time. TA will be a great experience, but not a lot of TA that will eat up all your time to do research. So yeah, I think this is really a key factor. If there are some money issue, your PhD, that really will distract you from doing amazing work.
And just to piggyback on that point, I should mention that there are a lot of awards and fellowships during PhDs that you can apply for that don't take a huge amount of time, and you, most university websites would post those publicly, and there will be set deadlines. And these are great, not just because of the money, because it's a nice line in your CV and it kind of shows that you can attract funding and these awards. But yeah, I think it deviates from our choosing the advisor, right? Because a good advisor should have enough money to support you. And if they don't, and you still choose to go with them despite of that, then you need to know that it has strings attached.
Yeah.
I think it's a good time to move on to the next point of our conversation, which is, I think, is maybe the most important one, which is like in any good paper, is collecting references. So how do you make sure that your future advisor is not a psychopath?
Oh my, yeah, this is really like really important, collecting references. I would say, like, I guess a lot of people, if you're in the middle of an application process, the first thing you'll probably do is just email the advisor. But in my own experience, I would say a lot of advisors, they are receiving hundreds or thousands of like such kind of emails during the application season. So it's unlikely that you're going to get a reply or get a chance to talk to them directly. So I would say one of the best way to find the references is to get in touch with their students. And then they will be able to say a lot of things from the student's perspective, but it's what are their experiences in terms of in terms of all the aspects like monies, in terms of the lab, in terms of everything that we discussed before. So I would say making sure you have get in touch with their students is a great way to get some references. Or even if they have time, you could even try to set up some small chat with like a 30-minute chat with them to kind of just talk to them in person to get a feeling about the lab. And other references. Another reference is usually like during the application season, because if you apply for a PhD program and if you get accepted, for example, getting an offer for the PhD, and at that stage you are going to choose among, like, for example, the many offers that you received. In that case, I would say that a great way that you can really get an in-person experience is to pay a visit. Like if they're able to sponsor you to pay a visit to a lab, or you have some money that you can just fly there or visit there to kind of be there for a couple of days, that will also be an amazing chance that for you to get a really in-person experience of what the lab feels like, what the advisor feels like in terms of their advising style. And if you pay a visit, you are definitely going to have a chance to talk to the advisor one-on-one. And in that case, you get a first-hand experience on their supervising style, and then whether you get along with each other and a lot of aspects. So that would be the way I try to get references, like get in touch with your students. And if you get accepted, try to pay a visit to the lab if you can.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to kind of even maybe a little bit expand on that. So a lot of times the TAs that you're going to have for your bachelor's, like assuming if you're continuing your PhD in the same institution that you've done your bachelor's, then the PhD students of that advisor would be your TAs, right? Or have been your TAs in some course or another, right? And that's a great, like you can grab them after hours or some like reception hour that they sit around, wait for students to come ask questions. And you can approach them and ask them. And it's important to come with a specific list of questions, right? Because they're currently PhD students of that advisor, they will be very reluctant to say anything negative about that person, even if they're a very toxic person, right? But if you ask specific questions, then they would answer truthfully. So for example, how many people are at the lab? Or how often do you meet your advisor? Or how involved are they in your projects, right? Or how many international or industry collaborations do you have? And what are the resources that you have available to you, right? And these are very objective questions that you can ask to get a feel of what is going on, right? And also, like, if you have specific things that you value, like work-life balance, for example, so you can ask, like, is it common to have meeting after hours or like in the night, or do you work weekends, or are you expected to work on holidays? Do you have time off? These kind of questions that are very specific to that person, they would answer truthfully, and those answers would give you insight into what actually is going on. Another thing to do is to also look at where are the graduates of the lab, right? If it's a new lab, then there might not be many. But if it's like a post-tenure professor that has like a list of people that already graduated, it's interesting to see where they landed, right? So if they're, you look up that person, that professor, right? You look at like a little bit older papers, and you look first authors of those papers and on LinkedIn or on Google, and you may find where they are today. That also is a good sign, right? Because if they landed in a good institution or a good company, that means that there was some value to that training. It might not reflect a lot about the personality of the professor, but at least it reflects on the value of the training that those people managed to get to a good position afterwards. A lot of advisors actually have a list of their graduates on their personal website and where they are today, right? Which I find really nice. It means like they see the value in the people that they're training, and they show it off, right? It's something to show off. Oh, this was my PhD. Look at him now. It's like almost you're proud of your children, right? You look at my son. He's so successful now. Everybody wants to show off their kids, and this is kind of thing that to look for, right? If they're showing off their PhD students or not. Are they giving credit when they give talks? Like, and credit is not just the slide at the end, right? It's the, are they naming the person and who did what? These kind of nuances. I mean, sometimes you're nervous at a talk and you don't remember, right? But seasoned professors, they know, right, how to do those things. And if they mention a person, what they did, and their influence on the research, then that's also a strong indicator of them as an advisor. And maybe going back to the specific questions that you can ask about the advisor style, right? What style of advice they give, right? Is it like a more general one and you're following your own path, or is it very, micromanagement and hands-on and digging into codes and bugs together, right? It's something to ask because you probably know what's best for you, not necessarily, but you probably know what's best for you. And asking those questions would give you a better idea of what to expect, right? Also, talking to graduates, if you have the ability, right? If you find their email and send them an email, hey, would you be keen on jumping on a call or something like that? Because people won't write negative things, but they might say them. Talking to previous students, that's also a good option, right? Because they're not under that person's thumb anymore, right? They have nothing to fear. Well, maybe a little bit. They might need some reference letters in the future, but they're not as limited in the what they can say. Right? Now I'm painting like a picture. Everybody's afraid to say bad things about their advisor, right? It's not the case, right? A lot of the times they're just going to say a lot of good things, but there are red flags that you should pay attention to, and I just want to stress that so you don't find yourself in a toxic environment, because a lot of people, the mental state of a PhD is very important, right? A lot of people put a lot of emphasis to it. It's like their life ambition, the family is counting on them. There's a lot of weight into that, and finding yourself midway through the PhD with a toxic supervisor could be devastating, and you don't want to get there, right? You want to do your homework before you start and make a conscious choice that this is the right thing for you.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing. Actually, you mentioned about talk to previous students. Actually, that reminds me that another great opportunity for you to get a first-hand experience with for example, the group of students and advisors is actually to just attend some conference. There are a lot of conferences that have the student volunteer as an option, and you can just apply it, become a student volunteer at a conference, and go to their talk. And if there's a chance, ask questions, and even try to talk to some of the students or even the advisor themselves to just talk to them and chat with them. That will also be another great opportunity to get first experience instead of just emailing them or to see whether they reply. And also including their previous student. Perhaps if their previous students remain in academia, then you can also meet them at conferences. So that's another resources I think people should enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. There's also like in some conferences, there's like a doctoral consortium and like a bunch of these type of like maybe even like social gatherings outside of the main conference that you come even if you're not attending the actual conference. Yeah, trying to catch people when they're not in their normal or regular. That's a very good option. I totally agree. But I do want to emphasize one point you mentioned earlier is if you have the opportunity to work with the advisor for a limited amount of time, either an internship or a project, like I don't know if there's like a research project in your bachelor's or an honors project or something like that, that would be the best thing to do. It kind of tests the water. You see if you get along. If you do, great, right? You also sometimes get invited to the group meetings and you kind of see the dynamic of the group. These are like your best options for getting the information you need over a prolonged period of time, right? So it will actually give you a taste of the experience, what it's going to feel like when you actually eventually do a PhD.
Yeah, I think that's totally agree. I think like the best chance is to really just do research with them. And there are a lot of faculties that are taking summer internships, and if you're at the same school as a like ideal advisor you want to work with, take their course, doing course project, or even like after the project, you can see whether there's a chance that I can continue working with them and with the group, potentially get a paper. So yeah, I think that's definitely the best chance, but like best option, more like than the ones we discussed earlier.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's a good time to move on to our next point of discussion, and we're almost I think out of the topics of the specific advisor stuff, but I guess the most important thing to stress, and we said it like a million times, but still I want to say it again: there's no one size fits all, right? Some people prefer a micromanager, some need space, and what you need to do is to understand what works best for you and make sure the supervisor or advisor matches, right? The best advisors would adapt to you, right? They would see what you need and they would provide the support you need, but it's not necessarily that would be the case, right? So, because we're all human.
That's right.
Okay, but besides advising style and the lab, what really matters when you're joining or starting a PhD program? Let's start with the research topic.
Okay, I would say the research topic is really like find the one that's either like basically share the same interest. I think everyone will agree with it. Like because you're going to spend like the next 5 years on doing research with that advisor, and if you have a shared interest that you're both interested in the same thing, you can learn together. And if he's already an world expert in certain fields, you can directly learn from them and even become a better researcher at that field. After 5 years. So in terms of research topic, I would say really find the one that is like share the same passion with you. And I know that there are some students that may not know like for sure that this is the topic they want to research for their next 5 years. For example, I'm the one of the example where I switch between different things, like doing my PhDs. So if you're that kind of person that are not 100% sure that you want to research on certain things for like the rest of your PhD, then it would be also nice to see what are the recent public or like the publication record for the lab or from the advisor, and try to get a feeling of like the diversity of the topic that person is familiar with. Because if you're not like a person who are like 100% sure that you are going to research into this, then there's a chance that you may get to switch different topics. Then having an advisor with flexibility in terms of a topic they can work on is a very great thing for you, because if you happen to switch things, perhaps it's within their expertise, and you can also receive advice from them. So yeah, I think that in terms of topics, just find the ones that match your interests. And if you're not if you don't know your interest, then find the one with like flexibility within like the area, for example, within computer graphics, for instance.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think so. Obviously, your research topic in your PhD is one of your most important things, right? But I like to look at a PhD as a journey, right? Because when you're starting off, you know very little about that field. You have like this maybe dream of something that you want to do someday. You have no idea if it's even feasible. But then you start doing, you work on a project, you do one thing, and then you understand, well, do you like this direction? Do you want to go in another one? And it's important to, well, first off, choose the advisor that, you know, can provide support for that, right? Check, like you said, you check their papers, you can see if they're expert in the field, but also maybe if you're not that certain that this is maybe other publications in adjacent areas, if they're flexible, advising kind of style, and kind of to allow you to see if midway through your well, I don't have a lot of experience, and maybe we can bring an advisor or someone else that can help you with that. Or they can say something like, you know, I'm happy for you to chase this topic. I don't know how much I can contribute, but let's do it together, right? And it really depends on the style and on the person. But definitely choosing your topic is important, and the advisor has a big part in that. And actually just talking to them and see what they're passionate about and what you're passionate about is a very strong indicator to see if there's like the chemistry and the correlation between your interests, right?
Another point I think it's like you mentioned, it's very, very great that the advisor is willing to learn with you, because if we remember earlier, like we talked about what will be a successful PhD, you're going to recognize as a person who are expert in certain fields or probably a great breakthrough papers on certain topics. And if it's a breakthrough, it means that this topic may not exist at the moment when you started. So if the advisors, so it means that if you want to achieve something great, perhaps it requires for you to be a pioneer in a new field that you cannot foresee at the moment. And if this is the case, having an advisor that's willing to learn with you and work with you to pierce a new route for the other people to do a lot of follow-up work with you, I think that's that's also a great bonus that you should take consideration, because I know a lot of people are working on existing fields, but there are certain few individuals that are just piercing new fields, and have your advice that we're able to learn with you. That's amazing things.
Yeah, and I want to actually highlight something that a lot of people don't know. Through the PhD journey, you start off where your advisor knows a lot more than you on the field and on your specific topic, right? You're starting off, you know the basics, right? You did your bachelor's, your master's, you know things you need to know, but they probably know a lot more than you do. About halfway through the PhD, you start to know about the same on your particular research topic, right? The same literature, you worked on it together, you have done more hands-on stuff, they've done like the more advising responsibilities. But then as you kind of cross the midway of the PhD, you're becoming the expert in the field. And then there's like this shift in the relationship that, you know, and it's really interesting, because a good advisor would kind of encourage that, right? Then they start learning from you, they start coming to you with questions, where it used to be the reverse, right? And a good advisor knows this change and is happy that it happens, because it just means that they've been successful in training you. But it's also important for the PhD to understand that this is a normal process, right? A lot of like PhDs become frustrated some time after they start, like, oh, I have nothing to learn from this professor anymore. But that's by design, right? This means that this is a good PhD. If you don't have anything to learn from them except their life experience, right? If you don't have anything, technical to learn from them anymore, that means that it's going well. and it's important to realize that this is happening and kind of shift the balance towards learning more of, kind of career advice from the advisor and these type of things over the technical part. But also like, in our field, things that are older than 2-3 years old, they're like ancient history, right? It becomes like, oh, who reads those papers? But they are very useful sometimes, they bring perspective and the history and things, how they evolve, right? And that's something that your advisor will be able to give. But it's important to know this shift is happening and to embrace it. Okay, but actually to share with the listeners something that when we corresponded about this episode, before you agreed to be a guest, you added a block of text that I kind of want you to address, right? Because I think it was like, when I read it, I said, wow, this is so important, right? So, and it relates to finding a supervisor and how they conduct themselves with their students. You know what I'm talking about, right?
So, yeah, I know what you're talking about. So, yeah, the point that I really hope to mention, but is that I think this is like very, very important that your advisor taught your success as part of their success or even in front of their success. Just like, I think you gave a great example that there are some advisors just treat the students as their kids, and they're proud to say, oh, I have a list of kids and they all went to amazing place after graduation, things like that. And these are a great sign that the advisors are proud of your success because I think you can see it from very different perspective. For example, if you're a star PhD and we know that the importance of having fellowship as a recognition, like for you to contribute to a CV, if an advisor cares about your success, they will provide support to, for example, help you to modifying the fellowship applications because they have a lot of experience writing grants. They know what is a great application document to send to the fellowship. So if you will receive a lot of advice from that, and not just like the fellowship side, perhaps when you get a paper accepted, you want to give a presentation, an advisor will also be a great resource for you to learn how to give an amazing talk. And that's actually very, very important. That, like in addition to just publish great papers, and there are a lot of other aspects in PhD that are more than just papers, including like your networking and whether you will get a successful like connection in the industry if you want to go into industry career, or whether you have successful academic relationship that, for example, if you want to help ask someone to write reference later in the future. And then also like for your collaborations and not just like fellowship. And then there's so many things like in the PhD that are very, very important for you. And if an advisor who like really treat your success as their output and their outcome is really, really important, because it means that they will already show indication that they will support you in all these aspects, like beyond just publishing papers. And those are very important for you. So I think this is really, really, really important thing that you should choose on. You don't want to, for example, join some labs and then you just, for example, be like a labor. I don't know whether it's a nice analogy, but I would say like just try to get a sense of whether this advisor really treats students' success as their success. I think I was lucky that my past advisors are all like this person. I learned a lot from them beyond research, giving presentation, writing a great proposal, and things like that. Those are super valuable.
Yeah, I mean, when I read it, when you wrote it in the email, I was like, oh, this is the most important thing, right? Having an advisor that counts your success as their own success and not, putting themselves first, because, we're in a very competitive age, right? You always want to advance your career, do great things, and students, right? These are the smartest people you can get for the lowest paying rate, right? And like your power over them is nothing like you have anywhere else, right? You're basically deciding their entire career trajectory, right? You can tell them and they would do almost whatever you say, right? Because they know that you can destroy or make their career. And not abusing that power, right? But doing the opposite, like saying your success comes first, like your success is my success, is so important. I think the problem is that this is really hard to check and quantify, right? But I think there are some indicators that you can check for that, right? Because, for example, if people at the lab have a lot of internships, then that's a good sign, right? Because basically when a student goes to an internship, I mean, if the advisor is not involved, then they don't get a paper out of that. They basically get the student gone for 3-4 months out of the year, right? And they're losing, but you're gaining a lot as a PhD student, right? You're getting a network, you're getting to know people, you're getting to work at companies, you're getting compensated, and a good advisor would maybe even encourage you to do that, right? Have you applied for internships this summer, right? And this is something that's easy to check for. And if they would sit and go over your grant application, go over your CV, go over your presentation, right? If they do all of those things that they clearly don't have to do, right? This is on you, but they want you to succeed, then that's an amazing boost. And I think there's a point where they become like life mentors, right? Because these people, you're going to shoot them an email even after the PhD, and you're going to ask them for a favor for I don't know what, right? Professional or whatever. I'm applying to this grant. Can you have a look? And they would say, oh, of course, I'm happy to help, right? These are people that you want as your advisors because these are like lifelong connections.
And I also want to add a few things. I think this is like Itzik said, there are a lot of indicators you can get a sense of it, not necessarily quantify it. For example, when you talk to students, you can ask whether something like, okay, how often your advisor help you to, for example, some fellowship applications or polish your presentations. My personal experience, I would say at the first year of my PhD, I didn't know anything about like fellowship because I didn't know the importance of that. But it is like my advisor reminds me that, okay, you should apply for faculty, spend like this amount of weeks, cranking up some applications and send to them. And this is super important. Like if without someone to tell you the importance of it, you may not know it. And when you know it, maybe too late. And even the advisor will, if put your success in front of them, they may even discuss your career planning. For example, at your mid of your PhD, you may have a discussion. Okay, do you want to become like an industry research in the future, or you want to become faculty research in the future? This may change how you want to prepare your PhD for the next few years to, for example, to tailor made for that direction. So if you know there's no one that can guide you through this process, maybe when you recognize it, maybe too late. And so I would say they're just super, super important. And also like the advisor is just like another example that shows how important it is to choose the right advisor for you.
Right. Okay, next point. How do you find and impress a supervisor?
Oh, wow. How do you find impressive supervisor? I would say...
Well, let's start with how do you impress a supervisor, right? Because it's not easy, right? You send cold emails. You don't know if they're going to reply. What do you do?
Yeah, I would say it. I think it depends on the cases. I can mention one case, and then you can share your experience. At least one thing I think is useful. If you are happen to in the same school, then take the course. I think in a lot of courses, in CS courses these days, they all have course project. And try to do an amazing course project. And if you do an amazing course project that is beyond the expectation of the course expectation, even to a level that is a potential publication, I think that will be an amazing way that you could impress the advisor that you hope to work with in the future by having some evidence that just show that you can do amazing work. And then to the point that you can publish a paper. I think that will be at least the first option I would choose to impress advisor if you happen to have the same school. How about you? Do you have other tips?
Yeah, I guess at that point in your career, you don't have much of a network. But kind of like we said before, you may have like a TA that works with or worked with that advisor, and you might have a better connection with the TA. And I think it's a general advice in life that if you have a personal connection with someone that can take your, like, it's very metaphoric, right? But it can take your CV and put it on the top of the pile, then that always would always give an advantage, right? If there's someone that you can email, oh, listen, I'm thinking of applying. Can you forward the email or do an intro email for me? That always plays a better role because, these advisors, they get hundreds of emails a day from people they don't know. And like me, they have like a weird name that they don't know how to pronounce, right? And it's easy just to ignore it, right? Or move on because they have a lot of things on their plate. They're not doing it because they're mean. They're doing it because, there's hundreds of emails. Like, how do you, sift out the good ones? So I would say personal connection is very important. But if you don't have one, then I would like to give some advice as to how to write a cold email. I'm at the stage in my career where I started receiving cold emails from students, and I made it a point to answer them, right? Because I remember what it was like being on the market, and sending cold emails and not getting any response. And it's super frustrating. And don't get frustrated, right? It's not always you. But there is one case where I don't even read the email. You know what the case is? Where the email starts with, Dear Professor Shabbat. You know why? That tells me two things about that person. They don't know who I am because my last name is Ben Shabbat and not Shabbat, but okay. And it's even hyphenated, right? But the other thing is that they don't know what I do because I'm not a professor yet, right? So sure, they might want to be respectful, but I guess what my advice is always integrate into your email information that you gathered about that advisor, right? What are their interests? What are their latest papers? What are they passionate about? What are their values? Work that into the email. Make the email not too long, don't give them I went to this and that kindergarten, right? They don't care about that, right? You want to be concise about your interest, your intention, and show them how A, it aligns with their interests, and B, how you are the right person for that job. And today with, tools like ChatGPT, it's very easy to write all those things down, bullet point, and phrase that email in a very good, level of English and have it flow well and very succinct. And it doesn't guarantee that you get a response to that email, but it will increase the likelihood to get a response. For me, you will definitely get one, right? Because if I see that even if I don't have any openings or whatever, I would always say, oh, thank you for your interest. Unfortunately, I don't have any openings right now, and good luck, right? And when I was sending emails and I would got those back, I was like, oh, okay, thanks for replying. 90% of the people did it. Or 80, I don't know.
Okay. I also want to add a few more points. At least, I think if you are in an email, in a cold email situation, I would say at least from some of the advice I talked to, I can share first what they are worried about. And if you address them, then you may get a chance of their reply. For example, they were worried about accepting a student who do not have is not passionate about the research. Because there are some students that, I don't know, for some reason they do a PhD because they think they should do a PhD, or for other reasons. They are not because they are passionate about research. And that's something I worry about. They choose some students who are not interested in doing research, but you happen to do research, doing a PhD. That's a red flag for the advisor's perspective. And another thing is that the student may not know, for example, may not know what research is. A lot of students doesn't know what research is before they study. That's for sure. But there are also some students who are not very determined that the research is what they want. At least I think if you're applying for PhD, you should know that research is the kind of work you want to do for the next 5 years. So I would say these are the things that some advisors care about. They receive something that is not passionate about research and also doesn't know what research is at all. And that's something that they're worried about. So if you want to address these things to make you a person that are clear that this is person is passionate about research and know what research is, I would say there are the few things that I will definitely recommend people to do. Like one thing is to write a personal website. I think over 90% of the CS researchers, students, or professors, at least the successful one, they all have their personal websites. So have your personal website showing the list of projects. It could be course project. If you have publication, you can put publications list there and create or even some GitHub page that you write a beautiful demo with some, implementing whatever paper out there and create a beautiful demo. Show them on your personal website. And these will be a great evidence saying that, this person already reading papers and even implementing papers. They know what research is, and then they are passionate about research. That's why they are doing this, even though it is not part of their homework. So having a personal website, and then, for example, when your email, you can even put a link there. And I know they receive a lot of email. They may not be able to reply them. But if you have a link there to your personal website or to your portfolio, I heard a lot of successful stories that they receive a reply because they put a link there, and the advisor happen to have the time to just click then, this is amazing, and then they get a chance of their reply. So I would say try to demonstrate you are a person that's passionate about research and knows what research is. And one way is to do a personal website and put a link there, and they click it, they can see an amazing portfolio you have done before.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's one way to stand out in the crowd, right? Have a nice website. It doesn't have to be too big or complicated or well designed. Something very simple and basic, showing off your skills. I actually remember when I built my website in my PhD, and I found that over time I added things onto it, and it was, I did that in that year, and it became like this kind of a online journal in many ways. So of course for me, I also had a blog and everything. It wasn't just like your basic website, but you don't have to go all that mileage, right? But it helps you stand out, right? It shows that you put the effort to build this thing, right? And if you're in computer science, you have the technical skill to do that in a day or two, right? To do this small project that will help you throughout your career. Okay, I think it's almost to start wrapping up. But before we do, I want us to do two lists of things that an itemized checklist when you're vetting your supervisor, because we talked about a lot of different things. But someone's listening to the pod and they want to do, okay, what do I do now, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I did that. Okay, I'm ready to make the decision. And the other list is a list of red flags. What should I pay attention to when I'm choosing my supervisor? Okay, so let's start with the itemized checklist of how to vet your supervisor. Item number 1.
I think item number 1 is to collect references, like we said before. Talk to the current students, talk to past students, and if you have a chance, talk to the advisors by any means. And I think this is very important for you to, get a feeling of the lab, get a feeling of advising styles, and get a feeling of whether this is an advice that puts you in front of, as part of your success. Item number 2.
Yes. Check the Scholar page and see the graph trend. Okay. Google Scholar is a website that tracks the publication of academics. Most academics have those. And if you see a trend going up, that's a good sign, right? It means they're active, they get more citations every year. But if it's going down, it's usually an indicator that something has happened, right? Either that academic took some administrative role, or they're having trouble getting funding or students or whatever, right? So item number 2 is check the Scholar page and see the graph trend going up. Item number 3.
I think item number 3 is to check the infrastructure, because like we said before, money is very important. That you don't want to have financial issues during your PhD, and then also you want to have the resources, for example, like a GPU to support you to do, for example, any AI related research. So do check the infrastructure to see whether they have the resources you need to help your success. Item number 4.
Item number 4, right? Check their previous students where they are today, right? Successful students, that usually means a successful advisor, right? So check where those people are today and see how much effect the advisor had on their career. Item number 5.
So I think item number 5 is to, like we said earlier, check their active grants. Like this will like basically a great indicator to see that whether they have enough funding to support you, to give you, like, for example, stipend and support to the conference, which are very important, or even, give you some resources for the compute that you need. And item number 6.
Check for red flags. We have a full list on red flags in a minute, but check for red flags. This is the most important. Avoid toxic advisors if red flags appear. And the last item on the list. There.
Yeah, the last item on the list is to remember that, like, academic achievement, meaning published papers, is not the most important. They are very important, but not the most important thing for your PhD. So when you, try to consider the advisor and everything, try to consider every aspect, not including the ones we mentioned above, not just about like papers.
Yeah, now they have their checklist, right? They know what to look for in a positive way, right? They know what they need to have in an advisor. But now let's move on to the red flags list and see what advisors shouldn't have. Derek, red flag number 1.
The red flag number 1 is to just if the students or the past students say something negative about the advisor, and it's very important for you to aware of this and to see whether that red flag is that negative thing is a red flag for you. If it is, then maybe it's nice to avoid that. Red flag number 2, Itzik.
Have like consistent unresponsiveness to emails from their students, right? So missing an email or two every now and then is fine, but if they never respond to their students' email, that's another red flag, right? You don't want an advisor that would never respond to your emails or attempts of communication. You want someone to have an open communication line. Red flag number 3, Derek.
Yeah, that's also relevant to like the thing you can check with their student is that if the advisor just, if they set up meeting, they don't show up and they don't even like tell you, it's actually a negative sign that they may not that respectful for your time, that you're actually waiting them in front of their office. And I think this is something that you should be like, even a busy person should acknowledge you that, okay, I don't have time for the meeting, we should schedule it. So if you hear this kind of a signals from talking to their students, that to me, that's another red flag. Red flag number 4, Itzik.
No online presence, right? So if the advisor does not have a Google Scholar or personal website or a personal website that's very out of date, that's a very red flag, right? If that person is active, then online presence today, it should show. Some people don't have Google Scholars for a principal reasons, which I understand. Some don't have other social media platforms, but zero online presence, that's a red flag. Next red flag, Derek.
It's just no grants. Like if you, like we said, the importance of money. If there's no grants, no money to support you, then then you may consider your own financial situation, because the worst case, you may need to like spend a lot of your own money out of your pocket to sponsor your own PhD. The next red flag is Itzik.
Yeah, Google Scholar trend declining, right? We said in the checklist to see that it's going up. So red flag if it's declining, right? You want someone that's active in the research and can help you, especially in the early years of the PhD. And a declining Google Scholar trend line is not a good sign. And the last red flag, on to you, Derek.
Yeah, the last one I would say just to double check whether the advisor have like collaborators, like either international collaborators or like industry collaborators. Like if there's no sign of collaboration in the past few years, that may not be a good thing, because for you, in order for you to succeed, you need to have those networking, have those collaborations too, which will be very important for your PhD career. So if there's no sign of the collaborations in the past few years for the lab, then that to me, that's also a red flag.
Yes, definitely. Okay, that sums up the two important lists of this episode, which brings us to closing remarks. Derek, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I would say this is a very, very important thing for your PhD. It really the most important decision you have to make if you decide to do a PhD, like choose your advisor. So, and then just want to emphasize one more time, like our experience and then our friends' experience may not be the one that's applied to you. So you should just treat this as some ideas, some inspirations, but really you need to understand what you need and then understand like your own personalities and to know what is the right advisor for you, which may be different, which may have a different definition from the one we mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with every word. I think this decision is one of the most important decisions that you're going to make in your academic life or in your even personal life, professional life, right? And it's important to make the right choice. Don't get sucked into the misconception of, oh, I just wish someone would have me, right? You're a high quality person with skills and capabilities, and you need to believe that anyone that you would end up working with you is equally as lucky as you are to work with them. And it's important to be in that state of mind where when you're looking for positions anywhere, not just in academia. And I'm happy we had this opportunity to record this episode and convey this our knowledge and experience. And obviously it varies, and different people, different cultures, different countries, different continents. There's no constants, only variables. But I'm very happy to share this, and I would like to actually invite the community, if you're listening to this and you have any comments or other questions or things that we missed and we haven't covered and you want us to cover, let us know. There's a comment section, and I have an email for the podcast, and my personal email is also online. So feel free. We're happy to help. Well, I am. I know that Derek is too, right? He's one of those people. And yeah,
thanks
Derek,
for having me. Thanks for being a part of the podcast again. Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, it's time to wrap up then. Derek, until next time, let your papers do the talking.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. That's it for this episode of Talking Papers. Please subscribe to the podcast feed on your favorite podcast app. All links are available in this episode description and on the Talking Papers website. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, sponsor it, or just share your thoughts with us, feel free to email talking.papers.podcast@gmail.com. Be sure to tune in every week for the latest episodes. And until then, let your papers do the talking.